Hallo, willkommen an alle, die den Weg zu uns gefunden haben, sowohl online wie auch im freien Wort, da im 9. Bezirk in Wien. I will give a very brief introduction in German on the idea of the framing and then translate to English. And in general, the webinar today will be rather in English for you to have all the possibilities to join in. But I will just give a short introduction. Ganz kurz zum Rahmen. Wir haben heute 3 SprecherInnen von unterschiedlichen Organisationen von WehrdienstverweigererInnen aus Israel online bei uns. Die Veranstaltung heute wird in Englisch sein, weil die 3 nur Englisch sprechen können. Sie werden dann auch noch die Möglichkeit haben, sich selber vorzustellen. Für euch zur Information oder auch zur Nachfrage, wir würden die Veranstaltung gerne aufzeichnen. Das sind in erster Linie die Personen, die hier sprechen natürlich, die drinnen sind. Aber trotzdem auch die Frage hier ins Publikum, ob das für alle okay ist, um das eben entsprechend auch dokumentieren zu können. Yeah, and as I just said in German that we will continue in English, I will now change to English. We have, so the idea of the webinar today was to focus on the histories and the the things that people refusing to serve in the Israeli army experience at the moment in Israel, and how the organizations of different organizations of so-called Refusniks. Maybe we should change, then we could let the others enter. Sorry. And how the different organizations of Refusniks organize themselves in Israel. So within a society which is very strongly marked on one hand by the ongoing war, and the mobilization, a strong mobilization within civil society to participate in this war, and enforcement to participate in the military, because you have an obligation to serve in the military, and to see how their experiences form possibly a part of the Israeli society which is able to oppose the ongoing occupation, which is able to oppose the Zionist narrative of the Israeli state, and to overcome in some way, even though they are very difficult to hear, their voices are very difficult to hear at the moment, to overcome this occupation or the state of the occupation and the narrative and the idea of a Zionist state, and to come to a new democratic form of joint living of people in the place of Palestine. And the idea was also to focus on the specific impact that the Israeli army has as the backbone of the Zionist state on the way how occupation and apartheid in Palestine is enforced, and to in this way to hear the specific voices of those who have been part of the military or were enforced to serve in the army or are enforced and are refusing to do so. And we have 3 representatives here, as I said before. We have 3 representatives of different organizations of Refusniks here. We have Ishai on the right-hand side. He is the spokesman of Yesh Gvul. And if I speak out the name wrongly, please correct me afterwards. We have Tom Mehera with us, who funded, who is representative or the funder of a new organization called Ani Serafti, and who is also active as a journalist, and who started this new organization right after the 7th October, also as an answer to the enforced ethnic cleansing, which is happening at the moment in Gaza. And we have Yali Agai. And Yali sees herself as an anti-Zionist queer activist, as a representative of the anti-war movement and of the youth bloc who is active against occupation. And what I aim to do is to give them, to just report on how they see the situation as activists in Israel, opposing also the main narrative of this Zionist state, what they experience, what possibilities of moving they have. That would give, in this way, first to just understand why it needs also organizations like the three which I mentioned. I would give as the first speaker the voice to Ishai, who is, as I said, the spokesman of Yesh Gvul, who is the oldest organization of Refusniks, and which was already funded in the 1980s, if I'm right, and who also advises people who are refusing to serve in the Israeli army how what they need to do, how they could act. And just ask you, Ishai, could you give us just an idea of what does it mean to refuse serving in the Israeli army? What do you expect as someone who's refusing to serve? What do you have to expect if you do so?
Hi. The name Yesh Gvul can be translated in different ways into English. It's there is a limit, there is a border, and enough is enough. And when we started it in 82 in the First Lebanon War, our idea was to use refusal and selective refusal and total refusal as a political tool to influence the Israeli government's policies. And during this last more than 40 years, we had Zionist members, anti-Zionist members, a-Zionist members, but the main issue was that everyone in a democratic society, or even if the society is not democratic, everyone who feels as a democratic citizen needs to have red lines that he or she will not pass. Meaning that this is our responsibility not to take part in activities that we feel that there are activities that a honest or democratic or humanistic person should not take part in. And as I said in the beginning, we have Zionist member, anti-Zionist member, a-Zionist member, but the main thing for them that they put a limit. They put a border. For us is the green line. We are not willing to serve at all as an occupiers in the occupied Palestinian territories, or to take part in wars that a person should not take part in. When we were established in 82, we had around 3,500 members. 150 of them were imprisoned. I was in it. I was an officer in the Israeli army, and I spent time in prison in March 1982 in the First Lebanon War. And since then, I did not take part in any occupation activity. During the first Intifada in 87, We had around 2,500 members who refused to take part in the occupation. 180 of them were in prison. And then we helped to establish under-organization, the courage to refuse in the second Intifada. And few hundred refused then and did not took part in the. And since then, the last 42 years, we are helping people that come and say enough is enough, and we are not willing to take part in occupation, apartheid, but the responsibility of each person is to define its own red lines. I want to give you 3 examples of people that I talked and met since October 7. The first one was a discussion that I had the last 3 days. A person that used to be in the home front command, meaning he was specialized in entering to bombed area to rescue people inside Israel, and his unit was sent to be occupiers in the West Bank. So 3 days ago, he called me and he said, I have this problem. I'm willing to serve in the army, but I'm not willing to be occupier. And from his point of view, he is a selective refuser. He's not willing to do something that opposes his consciousness. So we had long discussion. We talked about his red lines, the thing that he's willing, the thing that he is not willing to do. And he went yesterday to his unit and said, I'm not willing to be an occupier. So they tell him, you will be put on trial tomorrow morning. And of course, it didn't happen, and he was sent today home. In October, in 2 days after the beginning of the war, a soldier called me and he said that he received a order to go to Gaza, and he does not know what to do. And I say, okay, what are your red lines? And he say he want to defend Israel, but he don't want to go, but he find it very hard to refuse. After 2-3 days of discussions, he decided to go. He called me last week. He said he spent 3 months in Gaza, and he could not define his red lines, but then he was receiving order to burn the houses that his unit was sleeping during the war in Gaza. And of course, a civilian Palestinian home. So he told his commanders, I'm not willing to it's belong to people that this is the only thing that I have. Why to burn it? They told him this is the order, so he took the first car that moved out of Gaza Strip, a military car. He left in the middle of the battle. He was not willing to burn people home. And he called me to tell me, only then, when I received an order to burn the houses, I understood what are the meaning, the red lines that a person should not pass. I spoke since October with around 40, I guided around 40 reserve and regular soldiers. None of them were put on trial. They refused and they were sent home. People who said to the army right now, I'm not willing to be part of occupation. I'm not willing to take part in this kind of war. I'm not willing to be a soldier in apartheid. I don't want to take part in war crimes, and Israel is doing day-to-day war crimes in Gaza Strip. All those soldiers were sent home because the army does not want to deal with the issue of hundreds of soldiers. I spoke with 40, but there are hundreds of soldiers that are not willing to take part in this horrible war that targets civilians in Gaza Strip, or at the same time to take part in the day-to-day occupation in the West Bank. Right now, when we started to push people to talk about the red lines, and this is why I'm saying I think that Zionist soldiers have red lines, anti-Zionist soldier have red lines, and the Zionist soldier have red lines too. And I think that our strength as a refusal movement, and that everyone, if he believes in democracy or human rights or in humane approach to other people, can get help, can call us, and we help him to define his red lines and to refuse. When we started it in the 80s as a political tool, the reaction of society was very strong against us. Right now, we feel that for most of the Zionist left, and even part of the center of the Israeli map, the way that we are working is legitimate and they accept it, even though it's very, they feel the need to say we are opposing them. During the first war in Lebanon, every Peace Now demonstration, every demonstration against the war in Lebanon, the first speaker used to say that he's against the war, but he's against the people who refuse to go to the war. Right now, more and more people are saying this is probably the important way to show your resistance, not to take part, or because I'm 66 years old and I'm not serving, so I cannot refuse, to help people, to help others to define their dissent, to help them to perform dissent and to use it as a political tool. We are not taking part in such a horrible policy of a war criminal government. Thank you.
Thank you, Isha, for your first words. I would pass the second question to Yali and maybe take up also one of the ideas that Isha was referring to. Yali, you consider yourself as an anti-Zionist activist and you're a representative of the youth anti-occupation bloc. And I think because there was one thing which was somehow striking me when Isha was reporting and which I would like to discuss. You said, there are a lot of people who want to defend Israel, but they are not, they would not like to be part of the occupation. And I have the feeling, and it's maybe a question, Yali, that you could also refer to, considering yourself also as a representative of an anti-Zionist movement, because I have the feeling that this safety narrative that Israel is constantly, repeatedly telling the world that they have to defend themselves, that this is a very important aspect of justifying the ongoing occupation and the ongoing apartheid and the way how the state is organized. So, Yali, how would you, as an anti-Zionist activist, answer to this aspect, and what is the way how you organize yourself also in these youth movements? What are the main things that you want to address to people? Yeah.
Thank you. So, first of all, I'm Yali. I'm here mostly. I am from the Youth Anti-Occupation Bloc, but I'm here mostly on behalf of the Mesalvat movement, which Mesalvat literally means like refusing, but in like female grammatical gender. I don't know if German has it, but Hebrew has grammatical gender for practically every word. So it's like a deliberate feminist choice to have the name be female. Uh, So the Mesalvat network, first of all, is defined as a political refusal network, and we're both uh, an activism network and a support network for Refusniks, which are the two are very intertwined with each other. So we do like activism, we do protests sometimes, we sometimes do like uh, more like artistic demonstrations. For example, this Purim holiday, which if you don't know is kind of like Halloween for Jews. We like took a part of a boulevard in Tel Aviv, and like made it a costume of the refugee camps in the southern Gaza Strip, and put like tents and bags of corpses and flyers telling people to evacuate. Like I guess an artistic way to confront the Israeli public with the horrors that are done in their name. Uh, and we're also a support network, which is like at least as equally important in my opinion, because as you could probably guess, Israeli society is very militaristic. And like when I say militaristic, I mean that Israelis perceive military service as a part of life that is as central as finishing high school or like getting married. Like it's up there with like patriarchy as the main values that consist our society. Uh, so when you oppose militarism in any way, even if you're not anti-Zionist, you the reaction like from the public, in my experience, at least as a young person, is so violent and is so alienating, and you need a lot of strength and a lot of personal strength and a lot of like materially you need a support network. You need the resources to be able to break out of the first of all break out of the militaristic narrative that you've been fed, and second of all opposing it takes resources. So first of all, we recognize that not everyone can do it. It's a very tough choice. It's an activistic and by definition outstanding choice. They're supposed to challenge the regime and inspire other people, and it's not something that everyone can do. But we want to help as many people as possible do it. So we mainly work to create a support network for people in Israel who want to refuse service, who want to challenge militarism, challenge Zionism, challenge the occupation and ongoing ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, and give them a place to where they can just be without being constantly demonized and attacked. Like just the having a space to support each other and learn together is very important. And in terms of the question of to serve in the 67 occupied territories or to be a complete like a total refusnik, or the question of the security of Israel, I think it is a complicated topic, although uh, I lean more to the anti-Zionist side because I see, not because like I'm an anti-Zionist, not because I think Zionism is particularly like uniquely evil. I like it's as evil as like the United States or I don't know any other settler colonialist ethno-nationalist state. Uh, it's a project that I think goes against any basic values that I hold of democracy and equality and socialism. And so I do think that the state of Israel as a whole is an occupying force. I do understand the desire to protect people, to protect human lives. And I do think that very rarely, like it happens so rarely, it happened like for 1 or 2 days on the 7th of October, that the Israeli military saves human lives. Most of the time, it doesn't do that. Most of the times, it uses like the guise of protecting the nation to inflict immense suffering, to commit war crimes, to commit ethnic cleansing, and recently things that can be classified like a massacre so huge in its proportions that can be considered genocide, in my opinion. So I think that in the way I see it, I do want to protect human lives. The human life is the highest of values for me, but I think the best way to do that is to oppose militarism and to oppose the manufactured war that we're constantly experiencing and is a product of occupation and oppression, both within Israeli society and in the occupied territories of the Palestinian people. So these are my thoughts on the topic. Thank you.
So, Tom, Yael referred very shortly to the specific moment of the 7th October. And after the 7th, so you have been active for a very long time, just as Ishai. Before, you are also active as a journalist, but you decided right after the 7th October that there needs to be a new platform specifically focusing on refusing to serve in the army, which is, and I always put it wrong, so please spell it yourself. It's Anisarvani. It's like, I don't know. Please spell it yourself.
Yeah.
But what was the idea of funding a new platform? Why did you have the feeling that it is necessary to have a specific new platform after the 7th October? And what is the specific activities that you try to push forward with this new platform?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for inviting us and for coming to hear us. Basically, I refused more than 20 years ago. I was a soldier in a roadblock east of Ramallah, and we were told in the brief that it's for the sake of collective punishment. I was a commander, I was a staff sergeant back then, and after one shift in this roadblock, I decided to refuse. And since then, I've been like an activist in different organizations, demonstrations, tours in the West Bank, also in the Nakab, the Galil, etc. And I think what happened in October 7th was indeed a terrible attack on civilians and crimes. But by the same time, after a few days, as Yali mentioned, I thought, okay, we've just done of defending civilians and civilians, and it's okay. But then again, the Israeli army, the government, etc., went to a military solution, and that's it. And I wanted to emphasize the fact that we've tried again and again in front of the Palestinians, and specifically against Gaza, terrible acts of military solutions. Like almost 10 years ago, 8 years ago, it was Benny Gantz that said he said it proudly, Benny Gantz, when he launches his campaign. He said it proudly, I brought Gaza back to the Stone Age. It was 8 or 9 years ago. So when I heard what so-called Ministry of Defense, Yoav Gallant said, that there is no food now, no water to Gaza because they're animals and we're going to treat them like animals. and other Israeli officials understood that we were about to go to try again and again to attack the Palestinian people themselves, the people, the children, the women, uninvolved citizens, that the Israeli army and again is using practices of collective punishment that already failed. They've been failing again and again from the basic mission of defense, of security, because there is no a military solution to the situation of an army that controlling controlling other people. An ongoing occupation, and even before, many of the Palestinian civilians, of course, are refugees from 48 for the Palestinian Nakba and on. So I think the basic thing that I tried to initiate is to tell my colleagues in the Refusnik movement, I mentioned Courage to Refuse, it was mainly to them, because I was sentenced to jail back 20 years ago when I refused, I was sentenced to jail also, and I was part of Courage to Refuse. I just wanted to encourage my colleagues to say, let's reconfirm our voice of Refusnik, of refuse, of drawing a line, a red line, and maybe make the Israeli society at least think and talk about red lines. Unfortunately, things get worse and worse in the past few weeks, months. Like, it's not only the terrible declaration of actually talking about genocide, it's the fact that the amount and the character of killings, of demolishing and hungering Gaza, I'm afraid that we are, let's say, in a territory of a genocide. Like, we can't wait until we see that it is a genocide. If there is a risk, if there is a chance that we're in a process on a genocide, we must stop it. I think we should have stopped it way before, of course. But now it's a situation that it's our time, like, to raise all the flags and to say enough is enough. This is a red line. So I think what all of us, the platform itself is very simple. Refusniks say, "Who am I?" shortly. What is my story of refusal in the past? What happened when I said I refused? Did they sentence me to jail or not, etc.? And why I would refuse again today. And to put it as simple as I can, is to try to challenge mainly soldiers, but not only soldiers, to think about red lines, to tell themselves, okay, there is a red line somewhere. I would put it, I hope. Like, we want to challenge them to think about red lines. So so far we've been trying to use mainly the social media like Instagram, Facebook, etc., by simple videos of Refusniks. And I believe that as time goes by, we will see more and more voices that will talk about among citizens that want to join the army, as Mesarvot do, and what Ishai mentioned from the Yesh Gvul activity. I think that we'll hear more. I also hope that we'll hear more and more voices that talk about refuse, about trying to first to take a consciousness decision about myself, but also to talk about it as a political movement of trying to restrain, trying to stop the government and the army from committing terrible war crimes.
I wanted to add just I just noticed that I I kind of forgot to give you like just a few sentences about my own refusal story. So if you're cool with that. So I'm 19, so I was supposed to enlist a year ago or so, and I'm what's called part of gray refusal. So gray refusal is when you use like the legal and I guess established means of getting out of military service, mostly either a physical health or mental health exemption. I got a mental health exemption, which was kind of easy for me because I'm a transgender woman, and when you're trans and you come to the enlistment office, they send you to the psychiatrist right away. It's kind of funny. But most of the refusers in Israel, I would say, are gray refusniks, because to actually go to prison and turn it into a political statement, a public political statement, is a very difficult thing to do. And a lot of people are jailed for being dissidents, for just not showing up to enlistment, and they don't get talked about in media because they're usually people of lower classes who just do it because they don't want to die in a war that doesn't serve them. And there are a lot of people who get mental health exemption. There are a lot of people who go through a conscientious committee and don't go to prison and aren't talked about in the news. And these are all like important ways to challenge the military complex, in my opinion at least. And we try to emphasize the role of these different refusal methods for people from different backgrounds who have different means and resources. So currently we have 3 active like public refusers, Tal Mitnick, Sophia Or, and Ben Arad, who just was imprisoned a few days ago. But there are a lot of dissidents and a lot of gray refusals during this war that don't really get talked about because it hurts the national morale of the Zionist state. So just know that a lot of people don't want to serve and they're just scared to publicly talk about it. And that's what I wanted to say.
I want to give numbers to the thing that Yaeli spoke about. Less than 50% of the 18 years old male and female in Israel are entering the army, meaning that more than 50% are or 20% Arabs, around 8% ultra-Orthodox, but the rest are people that are not willing to serve in the army and find different ways to escape recruitment. So it's a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Ishai.
Thank you. Thanks for all your input. The numbers were astonishing now. The numbers were astonishing me, at least. I would have thought that that most people in Israel start serving in the army, and that the numbers of refusniks are rather small. And as Yesha also said, as they are not talked about. But I would take the chance now and just give the floor also to the audience to ask some first questions and to start a discussion. And after that, give you the possibility to answer. Just for the ones who joined in online, because it would be too difficult to have also the online people speak, please write your questions in the chat and Willy will then take it up and ask the questions for you. I think that would be easier instead of unmuting all people that would like to ask questions in the online room. So we will have the discussion now, mainly starting in the audience here, but you are, you're invited to ask your questions via chat. Bitte.
We can't hear.
Maybe. If you speak out loud, they should hear you from up there, but otherwise I can give you my mic.
So I would be very interested and how the perception of the Israeli society. You don't hear me? No? Can you hear me? Okay. So I would be interested in understanding and knowing what the perception of the Israeli society is about people who refuse and how they are being sort of welcomed or rehabilitated into the society.
Should we collect questions first? Are there any others? Or...
Yeah, maybe I will add something. Thank you, my friend, that you come and share with us your biography and your experience. I will say mine, actually. I was in Yesh Gvul 82 in the beginning, but as a youth, we call ourselves Ad Kan. It was a youth movement of Yesh Gvul, and every year in this time, especially after the first Lebanon war, there was a Shminist, the letters of the I class of the I school, which is a kind of collection of signature, which leftist and peace-orientated, which reject militarism and occupation, and so they are collecting signatures and sending it to the security minister and to prime minister and so on. So in Lebanon time, I was in one of them. Meanwhile, yes, a lot of things. But I would like to give my take. How do I see Yishai and Tom and Yali? I mean, in the beginning, 82, the issue was occupation. It was occupation. It was not serving outside the border of Israel and rejecting it. And this was the collective agenda which the left or the peace movement, which oriented into anti-militarism and tried to influence the public sphere. By this is the border, the green line. It's changed. It changed around maybe after Oslo Agreement, after Netanyahu 96, especially 2000 in these 6 refusers, Matan Kaminer and Chagai Matar and some other 4 importance, and they serve around 9 months. And they refused. They refused to serve in the IDF. This is a kind of shift point. Now, we must agree that there is, although what Ishai said before, and it's very crucial, around 50% gray do not serve in the army in different reasons, Arabs, Orthodox, and so, and of course, like Yali, others. So, but of course, the issue is very neglected, and there is no much people that's going to the prison, and it's not really a movement, kind of. We must admit it, it drops, kind of. And then there is also the position of the organization Ani Siravti, which is taking those people that refuse already, that's in our camp, and they want to make a point. They want to make a statement and to use their past biography to state what is the present affair in Israel, what is to be like now this criminal war, whatever we call it, and to make effort and to change. So this is, and then there is, of course, Mesarvot, which is so important to the movement. At least they give them support and they protect them and they give them a head and they try to kind mobilization. Yeah, this is a bit my take about how do I see Yesh Gvul and Ani Siravti and Mesarvot.
So, in relation to the question about how we as objectors and refusers are perceived in Israeli society, I can give my experience as a youth who is like, I guess, currently refusing because this is the time when I'm supposed to be in the military, it's very harsh. When even people who just voice opposition to the war or criticize the actions of the IDF are usually met with a lot of hostility. So let alone people who actually refuse military service, which is like the holiest thing for Israeli society. So it's very uncommon for us to be called traitors, a fifth column, and auto-anti-Semites, terrorist lovers. I like when about 2 months ago when Tal Mitnick was currently in prison, and we went to do like a support protest in front of the military prison for him when he was inside. And when we posted about it, the reactions were so violent. Like people wish us death, I wish it was you who were killed on the 7th of October. I wish it was you who were kidnapped on the 7th of October. Or like wish us to be murdered or to be raped by Palestinian militants, and all these kind of wonderful stuff. So I'm lucky to live in a rather like progressive environment. I live in Tel Aviv, which is like the most leftist city in Israel, so called. But I have friends who are refusers and part of the refuser movement in like more peripheral towns who are more conservative, and the reactions that they get from the environment, from their environment, is so violent, like that I can't even imagine. I don't know if I could have done the activism I do if I was in such a violent and right-wing environment. So it's harsh. We're not like received well in Israeli society. It's not a very especially now when people perceive this war as like, if we don't do the thing that the government told us we have to do, then we will all die and everything will be terrible. So when you say you refuse, people take it as you want every Israeli to die. And so they react very violently to it.
My experience is little different. And I would say that in the social media, yes, there are a lot of hate talks and a lot of wishing you death and many things like that. But in life, looking at almost 1,000 people who refuse and were in prison, just a moment. We know of only 3 cases that people that were in prison had problems in their workplace. 3 to 4 cases since the last 40 years. Yes, there are a lot of hate talks, but in every demonstration against the war or against the occupation or the apartheid, we hear from the other side bad words, cursing, etc., etc. But somehow the attitude towards people who are willing to go to prison for their ideology, many people respect it, even people that oppose a refusal. So yes, in the social media, a lot of hate words, but and I was, let's say, I'm very, marked as a refusnik. Everybody know that I refused and I was in prison. And maybe there were workplaces that didn't want me in advance, but I never have a problem to find the work or to teach in a university. I taught there for 20 years, or to do things or to talk about all the things that I'm talking about. Yes, there are campaigns, there were campaigns against me, but not as a refuser, but more as a leftist, that I'm some sort of agent of European countries trying to change the Israeli society. Even though there are a lot of hate talks, people who refuse, and I know many of them, receive a lot of respect from the left side of the society and some sort of respect from the center, and of course a lot of hot hate talks from the right wing. So it's not that we have to escape or to hide ourselves or not to say who we are.
True. I want to highlight something about all of us. We're still part of the Jewish collective in a quite racist society and quite racist states. So we have the privilege to do a bit more radical, not a bit, more radical things than Palestinians, citizens of Israel, and of course, Palestinians in the occupied territories. So in that sense, I think that, yeah, the comments, the responses in many times are harsh. And of course, we've been to the Israeli jail. I was arrested a few times. Once I was even called to the Israeli Secret Services. They tried to make me to cooperate with them. I told them, no, thank you, goodbye. But still, I think that we are not exposed to sanctions as Palestinians, citizens of Israel themselves.
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
many friends of mine by the beginning of the war told me that they're afraid to even push the bottom like of things that I wrote, just because if they know that if they will like a post I wrote, they might be under investigation. And we know by the beginning of the war and up until now, many Palestinians, again, that refusniks doing something that is illegal. Palestinians that even post something on Facebook were fired, were under investigations, etc. Though the content of the post is under the freedom of speech. So yeah, I think we have a bit more space to be radical, and in that sense, I hope that we are using it wisely. But I think we all still use attorneys in order to tell us what you can do, what you can't say. We don't go out there and say whatever we want. That's
Yeah.
for sure. Not
I-
during a war, not during a government that this is the atmosphere. We use attorneys in order to know what is our borders of freedom of speech.
I completely agree.
Just another example, in November, when the demonstration against the war started, I came with big signs say Palestinian Lives Matter. So some people in this anti-war demonstration look at me and say, maybe it's not the right thing to carry. And I say, no, this is the right thing to carry now. And they accept it. Even Inon Magal, a right-wing journalist, put a picture in his Twitter showing me standing with Palestinian Lives Matter and say about all these leftists that don't understand anything and live in hallucination, etc., etc. As Tom said, we have the privilege to demonstrate, to resist, to not to serve. And because we are Jewish people, somehow it's accepted. And if Palestinians, Israeli citizens will do it, they will suffer, and they suffered much more.
Yeah, I completely agree with this point. And the way I see it is that the scrutiny and violence we receive for our activities is like, it's kind of anecdotal. Like, me and a friend got assaulted in Haifa a few weeks ago for putting up anti-war stickers, and I got fired from a job kind of for protesting. but these are like compared to the oppression that Palestinian citizens of Israel face, which is much more systematic and widespread. We have the government leaves us some like space to resist non-violently. We can protest, we can demonstrate, we can refuse, we can put up like stickers and graffiti. We can do all sorts of non-violent resistance without getting like murdered or arrested. And the same can't be said about Palestinian citizens of Israel, who have absolutely no space for non-violent resistance. And obviously for Palestinians in the West Bank who live under a military occupation, because these people in this situation, when they try to resist non-violently to the government that controls them, even in the slightest, they will either get arrested or the situation will be escalated into violence by the authorities. When Palestinians barely protest in Israel during the war because they're scared that they can get like arrested and seriously harmed by the police. So, and we can clearly see, like we talked earlier about the matter of like the safety of Israelis, we can see that the more non-violent resistance is suppressed for Palestinians, the more violent resistance there is. And it's really simple to understand, right? People will resist injustice in any way that they can. And if they can't do it through protests and these kind of actions, they will do it in a violent manner. It's not a moral, I'm not saying this like to condone anything. I'm just describing like a simple equation. And that's something I want more Israelis to understand, that their personal safety is very tightly depends on the liberty of Palestinians. And the more Palestinians, the more we oppress Palestinians, the less safe we are, because oppression breeds resistance no matter what.
I'd like to give back the voice to the audience, because we have one more question here waiting for a long time now. And we have afterwards one question also in the chat.
I would like to ask if there is any reporting about your organizations in mainstream media, print media, television, or if this is just blacked out by censorship and by mainstream narrative. And if there is some reporting, does it also reflect your thoughts about the war crimes, or is this just diluted in some way? So is it carried by the media to the people in Israel? I guess not, but I would like to know.
You guess right.
Just a second, please. We have two other questions. I would collect it, because otherwise it's getting difficult to go on. Gregor, I know. So, but Oscar, yes, please.
Do you know specifically about the situation of Druze who are also drafted into the army, whether they are, how many conscientious objectors are among them, and what is their situation? Are they punished differently than the Jews who refuse? Yeah.
And we have also one question online. Maybe we can just add it in, because it refers, I mean, you can read it here, but
you can read it anyway, but it's about whether there are conscious objectors refusing for religious reasons, and whether you free organizations work with mixed organizations like Combatants for Peace, Bereaved Parents, and so on.
Let's start with the Druze. There are two organizations that deal with Druze refusal. One of them is more connected to the Communist Party, the Druze Initiative organization, and there is another one that more near the Balad organization. We support in the past refusal of Druze soldiers. Actually, I think that the percentage of Druze that entering to the Israeli army is higher than the Jews that entering the Israeli army right now. It's hard to work with the media. Of course, now it's even harder. That's why we use ads. We pay for ads. For example, in the 8th of October, Yesh Gvul published almost, let's say, a 25% page of Haaretz on the front page saying, do not start a war. Of course, we started a war, but it's hard. That's why we're working via social media. We send a lot of newsletters, but the media is not willing to report about refusal. There are some news websites like Local Call or Plus 972 that interview every refuser, young refuser that refused to take part. So it's became, they have, I think, all their last 10-year refusal list there, but the traditional media is not willing to cover, even when you are informed them about refusal of soldiers or that the amount of refusal is going up, etc.
In relation to media coverage and news coverage, before this current war started on the 7th of October, we did get some news media coverage. The national broadcasting company, like the national channel, did a piece about 4 Refusniks who were in prison at the time and interviewed them. And this kind of thing like really couldn't, I think, happen in the current political climate, because right now they wouldn't even talk. Like Tal Mitnick, the current refuser, got the amount of days in prison that he got was more than like almost any refuser before, and no mainstream media outlet covered it, because my personal interpretation is that they just don't want the public to think about refusal, that they don't want people watching the news to think that refusing is an option, so they don't even show it. In relation to Druze, I just wanted to add a few words to what Ishai said. Obviously, I can't speak for Druze Arabs, who are in a very complicated situation, being both Arabs under the Zionist rule and being in some ways privileged over Muslim and Christian Palestinians. But the Druze refusal movement, I will say, is very old and very consistent, even though it's kind of small. And even one of the most important refusal activists in the history of Israel, Samih al-Qasim, was Druze, who identified as Palestinian Druze and was a member of the Communist Party and a really important, and also a poet and a really important refusal activist. So Druze do refuse. And as Ishai said, there are 2 organizations. And on the question asked in the chat about religious conscientious objectors, we did have like some talks with anti-Zionist Haredim, anti-Zionist ultra-Orthodox Jews. We aren't really connected to them because they're not, I would say they're like right-wing Zionists, right-wing anti-Zionists. They're anti-Zionists because they're very conservative, and they're like even more like nationalism is too progressive for them in some ways. So I do appreciate them. I appreciate any resistance to the Zionist state. And I also know like ultra-Orthodox left-wing anti-Zionists who opposed the occupation and Zionism for both religious and humanistic moral reasons. So that is definitely a thing that exists, and I personally know such individuals. But in terms of movements, I can't say that we regularly work with like Naturei Karta or Satmel. Yeah.
Noah, the one of Mesarvot
Our lawyer.
lawyers, and me, we met. I'm in the steering committee of Mesarvot too. So we had a meeting with two ultra-Orthodox refusal movements. We had a lot of discussion with them about how to do it and how to use it as a political tool, but basically they don't want to work with the secular refusal movement, and they are trying to separate from us because we are refusing for human rights, democratic values, humanistic values, and they are refusing for religious values, and they feel that their values are much higher than our values, so they don't need to copy or to use a secular arguments for not taking part in the army.
Also, the young refusers, like the young members of Mesarvot, there are a lot of young women and a lot of young queer people. So the ultra-Orthodox, they don't really like all that stuff. They don't want to be seen near us, most of them. And that's kind of a big barrier for collaboration.
Yeah.
Since we almost gave you the whole map of Refusniks in Israel, I would give another short example. To make a long story short, there is a fair in Israel about the Yemenite children affair. Back in the 50s, children were taken for certain communities, and the parents since then didn't see them. To make a long story short, the grandson of one of the activists in this affair, Uzi Meshulam, refused to serve in the Israeli army. I think it was 3 years ago. Following this affair, he went to the jail. In the jail, he had a hunger strike, and then the army released him. So it's also another example of refusniks. I wish we had some more. I'm myself a bit involved in this affair. I'm not sure that I can put it as a movement, but it's another example of refusing, following, I would say, institutional racism, history of crimes against certain communities, etc.
We have two more questions. One is from the audience here, one is in the chat, and I think the one in the chat is also a good point to like have the last round then, because otherwise I think it would be difficult to, like, we could speak on and on, but it would get very tiring. So the question in the chat, we have two questions here actually. The question in the chat is why it is so difficult to stop the war in Gaza. I would maybe translate it, but Aitan, you can of course change it again. I would translate it into what are the interests also within if you say there are so many people in civil society refusing to serve in the army, and that the percentage is so high, why is the power of the Zionist narrative, the narrative of the need to like defend Israel, and in this way also the legitimization of the horrific war and the horrific genocide which is happening in Gaza? Why is this still ongoing if you have so many people who would refuse to participate in this? But this is for the end. We have like two other questions here. And I would ask you to then just take the chance for a last round and answer. Yeah, please.
I have a question. You said you are refusing to take with war, and I know that there are 80% young people in Israel who are demonstrating against war. Is there any connection between the refuser and the demonstrating person? And the demonstration, they should demand from the government stop war and to have a conference for peace. Is there any connection, or is this parallel? One makes refusing and the other one are demonstrating. And I think the power will grow up for peace if you are working together and for and demand from the government.
Thank you. Willy.
You were explaining, mainly it was you, to that 50% of those who would be obliged to go to military service escape in some ways. And the rationale behind is clear that the army wants to keep opposition inside the army out and not to deal with this. But does today's situation of this genocidal war in Gaza and the movement of Refusniks, does it have an impact on the active duty army in Gaza and the West Bank in terms of making troubles to the military ranks?
So I will start. First, all of us taking part in the demonstration against the war. There are, we know all the other organizations that protest against the war. I'm going every Friday and almost every Saturday demonstration in Jerusalem against the war, together with my colleagues, first. Second, when I said that 50% or more than 50% of the youth are not entering the army, many of them are doing it because they don't want to, for many reasons. So we cannot see them in a demonstration. It's not that we see them in the refusal movement or in the demonstrations. Right now, most of the majority of Israelis are supporting the war, this horrible war. And this is the question that was in the online. They're supporting it because it's revenge, because we were attacked and it was justified to react in their point of view. Second, the war, there is no victory there. So the government does not have a victory picture to show that we won the war. So they will continue because to justify the horrible thing that happened in Gaza Strip, they need to show that they achieved something. And they did not achieve, not the kidnapped are back, and they didn't kill the leadership of the Hamas, and they cannot say that they won the war without some proof that we are the one who won the war. So they will continue. And the third reason is that it's the interest of our prime minister that knows that the minute the war will be end, people will start to ask about his responsibility for the war and he probably will go to election, will need to go to election. So he wants to push it forever, because if there is a war, there are not going to be an election, or not going to be demonstrating people will not demonstrate against him. It was a mistake, because last Sunday we were more than 100,000 people in the front of the parliament, of the Knesset, demonstrating for stopping the war, about election now, and about the occupation. Of course, the majority want only new election, but we, the anti-occupation group that contained many different organizations, we were there, and we have all our sign that Palestinian life matters, or there is no occupation with democracy, etc., etc., etc. So this war will continue until the government will have some sort of victory picture, or the prime minister will not going to be afraid of new election, or that people will feel that we achieve our revenge. By the way, all these three reasons are wrong, immoral, and they are not justifying the horrible things that happen to the Palestinians who live in Gaza and in the occupied territories. Because, for example, people who used to work in Israel from the West Bank are not allowed to enter to work. So they're suffering, and there are more and more poverty there, and more hunger there. So they're suffering too, even though the war is in Gaza.
I think the way I see it is that, yes, even though the things that the Israeli military forces are doing are not in the interest of any civilian on this land, and I think a lot of people intuitively feel that a lot of people don't want to serve in the military because they think it's going to be bad for them, and they're right. If you're most people, especially if you're from the periphery, if you go into military, it's either get killed or commit war crimes and live with the trauma for the rest of your life. So a lot of people don't go to great refusal, or as I said, a lot of dissidents right now, but it doesn't translate to political power of opposition to the right wing or opposition to Netanyahu's government and the criminal war in Gaza, because I think of very strong indoctrination propaganda by the Israeli government through the media, propaganda that pushes people to stay in a constant state of fear and unending trauma from the massacre of the 7th of October in the Gaza envelope, and to continue acting like a scared animal pushed to a corner, even though they're the ones holding the power right now in the war, and they're the ones massacring tens of thousands of people and destroying millions of homes. So I think it's mostly propaganda and indoctrination, pushing people to act irrationally and to dehumanize Palestinians and to have no empathy and to shake off everything their moral compass is telling them. And I think that's why inspiring people and pushing people to think critically of the regime and giving people new horizons for political imagination and empathy and humanization of different oppressed groups is very important to achieving. It feels pointless, but it must be a very important part of achieving liberty and welfare for everyone on this land, because peace cannot be achieved without, first of all, everyone here treating each other like humans. And that's the way I see it. And the war will end either with an insurrection of the Israeli public or with international pressure. And right now it seems like I'm hoping for international pressure.
I would say shortly that if we'll take just for an example the very rough and complicated issue of hostages and kidnapped citizens and soldiers and such, like I said before, by October 7th, for me there is no doubt that crimes were committed by Hamas, and the way Israel is trying to handle with this is only through the practices of violence and war. From the beginning, Israel said that the way to release them is by pressuring with the army. And like almost half a year ago, I didn't understand in what way you can use the army in order to pull out from Gaza 200 people. Like Gaza is more than 1 million people. There's tunnels all over. What you have in mind? So the war is continuing because Israel, like there is no way, unfortunately, that Israel think about finding solution in a more in a ways that there is no military violence and war practices. And unfortunately, so now, as for now, the whole Israeli apparatus, not only the Israeli society itself, the Israeli media, the legal system of Israel, of course, the army itself, the government, there's a consensus about the war and about this is the way we should handle the whole thing. And no, as for I have to say honestly, as for now, we in the Israeli left, the civil society, human rights organizations, Refusniks movement, we didn't achieve yet what we want to achieve. But I believe that we're trying all the time to bring a voice and that is kind of alternative. Like, and I hopefully that at some point, some people, some different bodies will have more, I hope, more, I would say, I don't know, maybe more room to listen and to say, okay, let's think differently about the situation. We have to keep raising our flags again and again in order to try to make this change. We can't stop. But so far, we are a very small minority, unfortunately. Okay, I'm sorry, I have also to say goodbye. My daughter with a flu, and I need to do some other duties. Okay, it's okay.
I don't.
It's okay. I'm sorry for. We'll talk.
We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I said the best to his daughter and goodbye, but sorry that you couldn't hear me. So thank you to the three of you, even though Tom just left, to give us your insights in the broad variety of what the Refusnik organizations are and what their visions are. And I think especially Yael has made very clear that, and I put it in the first place when we started, that the Israeli army is somehow the backbone of an apartheid regime, of the way how oppression against the Palestinians is built up and how the occupation itself is built. And this is very strongly rooted in the society, as far as I understood, especially from Yahil. But what I also understood, and I think that is important to see, is that in the variety of the different organizations of Refusniks, having also this left Zionist interpretations and different forms of refusing, there might be a way through refusing to serve in the army to get also a broader vision of possible ways to change the thoughts, how society sees itself, how this maybe, but this is just a thought and hope I have somehow, that maybe to also understand how the army itself is crucial for holding up these apartheid regimes, and to in this way involve more and more people. As we heard, it's like 50% who do not want to serve, and maybe the Refusniks organizations are organizations that can that are able to involve these different people and make them start thinking if they are seen. And I myself, or I think I'm speaking for our whole organization, I feel it a very strong and also positive side that there is specifically also anti-Zionist parts of that there are specifically anti-Zionist parts of the movement who try to really find to oppose the apartheid and the way how the Israeli society and how Israel itself, the state, is organized, and to find a peaceful solution in a democratic state, a peaceful solution for all people living in Palestine, and to really see what peace could mean. But this is just my understatement. That it gives me hope that there is also this voice within the Israeli society. So thank you all for participating.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Sorry. And thank you also very much to the technicians who made this possible. They invested quite a lot of time to set up all the scene here. So thanks a lot, and a big clap.
Thanks to everyone who came to listen to us and for inviting us. This was lovely.
Hopefully we can also go on with discussing. The ones here, of course, you're invited also to stay a little bit. And hopefully we can have the chance to meet in person once and to continue also the discussions. Thank you. And good luck for all the organizations. Bye.